Well, hello there again. Welcome to today's episode of the Hope Collective with Touche Life. Things are a little different. You see I'm still kind of in vacation mode, sweats, back little scenery, fresh sunlight, and still on my matcha. But today I had to just want to come chat with you and want to ask you like some questions as we're now going into the second week, ending the second week of August. And I wanted to ask you, when God closes the same door twice, what is it that we missed the first time? When God closes the same door twice, what is it that we missed the first time? What happens between what was and what's next? Let's chop it up. All right, now I'm your girl Tashay, and this is the Hope Collective with Tashay Life. So we're talking about hopes for every season. I had so many notes on this because I kind of want to go over them. So, you're not here by accident. Today is August 8th, 2026, and August 7th, which is yesterday. This month as a whole means so much to me. August 7th, 17 years ago, I ended my tenure with my very first law enforcement agency to pursue my entrepreneurship. Earlier this week, I transitioned from my law enforcement career that I am currently in the state that I'm in, to another platform. Those are two decisions, same field, 17 years apart. And the thing that I noticed is that there are two very different versions of myself that I've experienced in making decisions. Two different circumstances, two different versions of me, yet somehow I find myself standing at the same familiar doorway. Like, again. I didn't intentionally plan these dates this way, nor did I plan 4 years ago this month to transition and move to pick my family up and move to an entirely different state. And when I looked at all those similarities and I looked at my life and this month of transition, August has been a lot of transitions. I asked myself, I had to look at the connections between them. And I began to ask myself, God, what is it that you're showing me? What is it that you're showing me? There's so many similarities in my life for the month of August, and maybe you have a time frame or a season where you start to notice there are a lot of similarities in your life, whether it's a lifestyle change, a familiar change, a professional change. I also ask myself, what did I learn the first time? What did I learn the first time? Like I said, it's two very different versions of me. And what am I supposed to understand differently this time? So that's kind of what we're going to get into, and we're going to walk through. And of course, I always try to give us some practical things that we can look into with this. So scripture in Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, to everything there is a season. Everything has a season, including our careers, our relationships, locations, friendships, assignments, our identities, our professions, and even versions of ourselves. To everything there's a season. And sometimes we know a season has ended, but we keep trying to negotiate an extension. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know that you're no longer aligned. You know that thing isn't sitting well, and it's not the typical growing pain. If you're in a relationship and y'all are just, having a little growing pain and something you need to work through a little difference, the difference in whether or not this person is just not for you anymore, and this relationship maybe needs to take a moment. That can even be a friendship, as to whether or not you're holding on to something that no longer serves you and you no longer serves it. So what happens when you keep trying to extend something whose season has already expired? I want you to answer that question. What happens when you keep trying to extend something whose season has already expired? It can be very difficult to leave something when you don't have the very next answer. You might not even have all the specifics on why you're leaving. You might just know this thing isn't right. You might not know why you can't do certain things. You just know this isn't right. Finances might not be perfect. And the one thing about the Lord is that He doesn't ask for our budget when He gives us an assignment. You know what I'm saying? Because His ways are not our ways. I think I got some hair on my lip. His ways are not our ways. Our thoughts are not His thoughts. As far as the heavens are from the earth, so are our thoughts from His thoughts, our ways from His ways. And when finances are not what you expect them to be, and then the Lord is like, hey, I need you to go do this. Hey, this is what I want you to do. You know, you listen to all the success stories like Tyler Perry and so many people, and it's like, you want me to do what? Yeah, I don't even have a place to stay. You know, I could hear Tyler Perry probably like, what? You know, and that can be difficult. It can be difficult when you don't have the answer. Okay, well, what are you going to do next? Okay, well, what's going to happen when you get here? Okay, well, when we separate, how are we going to work this out with the kids? How are we going to work this out with the family? You don't have the answers. And that can be difficult. You know, when people don't understand your decisions, and I ain't talking about everybody, because some people, you know, their opinion is just invalid and don't matter anyway. But let's talk about those you love and care about when they just don't understand. And a lot of times they don't understand because they love you so much. They don't want you hurt. They don't want you to have to go through anything that could, they don't like to see you hurt. So they don't understand. They want you to stay in the familiar. They want you to stay in the safe place because it makes them feel better. And somehow they think it makes you feel better. But they just don't understand. That can be difficult to maneuver through. And it can also be difficult when the next opportunity isn't completely visible. So you're just going to step out on faith. So you're just going to go try this thing that you don't know. So you're just going to go move to this place you don't know. You know, when we moved up here to Georgia from Florida, I had known Florida all my life. You could have told me I was going to move 1,011,50,000, that's a number, different places. But I would have bet you dog down in heaven it would never been Georgia. I was dogmatic in saying I'd never moved to Georgia. There was nothing about Atlanta that I liked. To me, it was more of a facade. No shade, don't come at me. I didn't like the facade. I didn't like the image of it. I know it's a hot pot for a lot of people that really want to, make it and success and all that. But by the same token, I grew up in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, which was a quiet old money. So it was a different lifestyle. It was different watching people who had money not talk about it, not flash it, live calmly and collectively. They had generations of wealth. That's what I'm used to. So the loud fame and all that really is something I deter from. So out of every place I would have been, it wouldn't have been Atlanta. And I moved up here and didn't know really anybody. I have a couple of distant relatives here, but I don't really associate with them. And I have my best friend of 40 something years up here, and that was about it. I really didn't know anything else. And, that was kind of hard, and sometimes obedience means leaving before you can see where you're landing. And that night we drove up here, tears in my eyes, in the car, like I was running from the police. And I was running from the enemy. I really was. I was running from the traps of the enemy. But Pharaoh was on our track. And I was like, Lord, what am I doing? I'm leaving all I ever known. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know how this, I knew where I was going to go, but I'm saying I don't know the state. I don't know the roads. What am I going to do? And it was hard. What do you do when you have those decisions to make and they're that hard? Sometimes, again, obedience means leaving before you can see where you're landing. And if you are resting in the Lord, you know it's going to be for your good. That's where faith comes in. Abraham didn't know where he was going. Got the promise after he got there, but he got to getting. So let's look at something else. Let's look at the difference in quitting versus completion. Quitting something versus it's time to quit. It's the completion of it. The season is ended. There's a difference between quitting because something is difficult and recognizing that an assignment is complete. I want you to ask yourself, are you running from discomfort, or has this genuinely stopped aligning with where your life is going? That thing that we are talking about that we just identified a few moments ago, are you just wanting to get out of that because it's uncomfortable? Are you just trying to get out of that marriage because you and him or you and her just no longer drive? You want to go out more, they don't. And those are just growing pains. Things we still need to deal with, but they're just growing pains. You just don't want to deal with them. Or is it an abusive marriage that you're trying to hold on to something? I saw a video that came across TikTok. It might have been Instagram, one of them. And it broke my heart. It broke my spirit. It angered me so. You saw this man on Ring camera actively beating down this woman naked. And she's like, stop, you're going to get seen by the police, babe, babe. And you hear her calling him babe, and you still hear her affection for him. And he's like, I don't care, I don't care. He's beating her. And I was waiting on a group of real men to come up there and find him, because he would do that to a woman, but he wasn't going to death step to a man. He was just that much of a punk. Side note. But anyway, was she's trying to hold on to something that obviously she doesn't need to be in. But love makes us make some not so smart decisions. And my heart goes out to her. Or maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a job that where you're going no longer aligns with that job. I love law enforcement. I love the people. I love even the inmates. And I hate to say even the inmates. I say that because they often in law enforcement, and I'm speaking from the correction side, are often treated so unfairly. People hear jail and they automatically think, ooh, bad people. Some of the kindest people I've ever met, smartest people I've ever met, hardest working in jail. And whether we realize it or not, all of us, especially depending on where you stay, what state you live in, are really only one really bad day away from being in jail. One really bad day. There are some places you can go to jail for a traffic ticket. There's just ridiculous stuff. And some of the greatest conversations. Some people in my transition, I wasn't even able to say goodbye to. And it's my heart's prayer that they will know how much they mean to me, how much I've learned from them is how much they've learned from me. I was often looked at differently by some in the career, in the law enforcement portion, because they felt I was too nice to the inmates. And they felt I was too nice to the inmates. I wasn't too friendly. I was professional. And they didn't like that because God allowed me to walk into a room or a block or a pod, and all hell could be breaking loose. And I could speak to them and it would calm down. I'm not bragging on me. I'm saying that not because I'm so powerful and I'm me. I said it because from the moment I stepped in there with my uniform and my taser and my badge and all that stuff we had, I treated them with respect. And respect is leverage. And it was very difficult working in an environment that is already very low vibrational, a very angry environment, a very negative environment, almost a spirit of perversion in their environment, and watching inmates somewhat, not all, be mistreated and bullied simply because they're inmates. I've had officers say, I'm only nice to them when they leave. Like, who the heck are you? We're there to protect them and us. We're not their judge and jury. We're not there to punish them for whatever they did. But some of us officers take on that connotation, and we're wrong. And when you know who you are, because only people who are bullies like that, they don't know who they are. I'm going to tell you. I told them that. They don't know who they are. Because if you got to bully somebody, you're a punk. And you don't know who you are. And this is where you feel like you get your authority. So to work in a place like that, when you know who you are and whose you are, and have grace and hope, and knowing where God is taking you, it is uncomfortable working in that type of environment because it doesn't align with who you are. As much as you love it, as much as you love the people, as much of hope that you bring and positive vibes, you're going to ask God to do things for you in a different way. It might not be the jail, it might be another office. When you've worked somewhere and you're asking the Lord, or you know who you are, and you're in an environment working to the best of your ability, using your skills, and it's a good job, but you're not fulfilling your ultimate destiny. You have to come to a point where you realize whether or not you're quitting because you just don't want to deal with this anymore. And maybe the Lord has you there to finish doing what you're doing, or your completion is over. And that's why things are getting so tumultuous. Because one thing you want to be, and I want you to write this down, always want to be where God's grace is. Always want to be where God's grace is. When we were leaving Florida, when I was contemplating, when it was heavy on my heart, I really couldn't tell anybody. The guy I was dating, he was killed. So I wasn't talking to him. Everything was kind of off. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I don't know. And I was sitting in Dunkin' Donuts line. It was on the corner of Blue Heron and Congress. It was my Dunkin' Donuts. And there was a guy there who was always like my little brother. I would always look out for him. And he was so nasty and rude that day. We all have moments. But I remember just saying to God, okay, something is off. Everything is off. What is it? My energy is off. My spirit is off. What is off? And God, I heard him plain this day as you're listening to me. God said, my grace isn't here. I told you what to do. My grace isn't here. It was just as quiet as it just seemed like even right now, everything just went quiet in my house. That's how quiet and still it was. His grace was no longer there. If you do nothing else, you want to be where his grace is at, because that's where you're covered. You can have a good relationship and a good job and a good thing, but it's not the best thing. You can have a good bed, but it might not be the best bed. You can have a good car, but it might not be the best car. You want God's best. He loves you, and he will give you a measure of grace for the good thing that you want, but it's not his best. Be honest with yourself and ask yourself, are you in the will of God? And are you where his grace is at? So are you running from discomfort, or have you genuinely stopped aligning with where your life is going? I was no longer aligned with where my life is going, because what I was doing in that capacity was taken away from all the other things that God was giving me. That's another good measure you can look at, is what you're doing, whether it's in this relationship, is this relationship you're in taking you from who you are? Are you no longer pursuing the dreams and the callings on your life because you're in this relationship? With this job, are you no longer having time to do what you need to do? If is this job taken away from your family? For me, it was taking a lot from my family because I was sleeping during the day, and just missing out on everything. What is it? What are you losing by staying? And is it something you can work out, or is it something you're compromising? So sometimes staying can feel safer simply because it's familiar. That girl that was getting beat down, that felt safe. That felt familiar. And sometimes where we are feels more familiar than it is safe. And because it's familiar, like Florida home was familiar to me, I didn't see anything outside of that because it was familiar. It felt safer. But in actuality, it wasn't. It was the very thing that was the most dangerous for me to stay. Familiar does not always mean assigned. Just because something is familiar don't mean that's assigned to you. I was in a marriage for 14 years, together for 15 years. That one no way hell assigned. No disrespect. It was familiar. And because it was familiar, outside of the people that were in church giving me the legalistic part of why I had to stay, that's why I stayed. But when it started getting in my head and the Lord was dealing with me like, I ain't call you to this. What God put together, let no man put asunder. The problem is he ain't put it together. You can't expect him to keep it together. He didn't put it together. And I had to look at things like that. So familiar doesn't mean assigned. Familiar could just mean that was available. And that could just mean that was your preference. That's what you got into, but you didn't seek God for it. That could be the same with a job. A lot of times we go get a job. That's not what God called us, but that's what we do. Be real with yourself. A title can become a part of your identity. How do you announce yourself? How do you introduce yourself? For a long time, I had to stop introducing people say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I'm a mom of 6. Well, I'm a wife. Well, I'm so-and-so's sister. Well, had everything. I don't even introduce myself. I'm Alma T. Fowler. Well, my name is Alma T. Nixon, or Alma T. Fowler, or I'm Alma Tashay. That's my name. That's not who I am. I'm an unapologetic disciple of Christ, using my God-given gifts to move the kingdom agenda. That's who I am. Everything else is just something he's given me to do and a part of my assignment while I move the kingdom agenda. So what title are you holding on to? And has that become your identity? Are you the boss? Are you the CEO? Are you the director? I'm a college graduate. I'm a bachelor. All that stuff is good and great, and praise God for it. But that's not who you are. A uniform can become a part of your identity. I had a young man who was incarcerated, and he said to me one time, I'm just an inmate. I said, you're not just an inmate. That's not who you are. That's the stage that you're in right now. That's not who you are. What is your name? And every time I would see him, I said, what is your name? When he saw me again, he said, I want to thank you for that, Miss Fowler. He said, I ain't never looked at it like that. I said, don't let anybody rob your identity. We can't give you your identity because you're in here. God gives you your identity. You made some decisions that put you in a situation, but that's not who you are, and that doesn't have to be how you end. And so many times, good, bad, or indifferent, we take on what we've done, what we've experienced, the positions we have, the uniforms we have, and we make that who we are. And that's not our identity. A paycheck can become your security. You know, God is the source. Everything else is the resource. I learned He always gives us reminders. You know, I've known it, but a good reminder is when the paycheck doesn't come in on time or there's fraud on your account. You get a chance to be reminded of who running this thing. Because sometimes our paychecks become our security, and that's why people don't know how to act when they lose their job or they have to relocate or finances change. They don't know what to do. But I want you to ask yourself, who am I when I can no longer introduce myself by what I do? Who am I when I can no longer introduce myself by what I do or whose mom I am or whose wife I am or how much money I make? Your occupation is something you do. Being a parent is a part of your calling. It is not the totality of who you are. It's not the totality of who I am. Moving on, the 2009 me versus the 2026 me. You know, when I was back in 2009 when it first came about, and I was a married mother of 5 children. Mary Kay had just came into my life. I saw these boss women wearing their heels, I had been in a uniform for all these years, and these women were in their heels and stilettos and pantyhose, and I was like, that's how I grew up. That's what I like. Yeah, that's my style. You know, and I fell in love with the culture of Mary Kay, and I liked who my husband was when I was a part of Mary Kay, and where he saw that we could take our family. So I knew that, you know, he enjoyed it. I knew that the money was, you know, there was no cap on it, you know. I knew that I had become a pretty good dispatcher. I had just won an award, said most professional dispatcher. I knew I loved my officers. I knew they loved me. I knew I wanted to protect people, and I knew I had kind of reached my top there because I didn't want to be a supervisor. But I was afraid, one thing I was afraid of, and I want you to ask yourself this, one thing I was afraid of for me, I was afraid of staying the same. I was afraid of staying there 20 and 30 years like some of them had been, just in the same place, even though it was a good job. I just didn't feel it was the best for me. I didn't want to keep being there during hurricane seasons. I didn't want to keep being there through natural disasters. I didn't want that over my head. So I wanted to try to build my own life, my own standard, my own way. You know, the shows Empire and all those shows were starting to come out. Might have been not Empire yet, but all those type of shows were starting to come out. And I was like, I don't want to watch nobody. I want to build my own. That was just me. So I was trying to build something for my family, my legacy. You know, what did I believe my future would look like? Unparalleled. I believe I would go back to being the girl my parents raised me to be, in the suits, having business meeting, owning multiple businesses, raising my children, having my husband, my family. We're traveling around the world. That's what I thought. And now looking at this woman in 2026, I realize how life can change and change so quickly. So I think about everything that has happened in those 17 years. You know, I left there in 2009. We were divorced by 2014, separated in 2013. Had another kid, went from 5 kids to 6 kids. I was a director for 3 years, stepped down, motherhood changed, had 2 daughters that decided they wanted to do their own thing. I had to be the mother. The Lord told me to release them because of the spiritual battle I was going through. Even left my church. I had to realize that because they weren't aware and even understood the spiritual warfare I went through. I watch TikTok now, and they have all of these great African AI cartoon type things going on, talking about witchcraft and destiny swap and all this type of witchcraft and things that people try to do to you. And see, that wasn't around when I was going through it, because I went through with a real life witch. My ex-mother-in-law was really into the occult. And no one believed me. No one understood it. Very few. I can't say nobody. There was a few understood it. But I had God. And that's why you got to know whose you are, because I had the Lord. And the Lord would show me, even if he had to wake me up in the middle of the night, say, do this, do that. And it brought tumult on my family, because if the Lord tell me to get up and get that shirt out the closet and I didn't have a clue what it was, I had to do what it was. And I didn't know what I was getting it out for. But it was something that had been fixed. I had a grandmother who was alive at that time who kept me focused and helped me out with the kids. It was a lot. You know, I went through marriage, divorce, deaths, rebuilding, career changes, because I stepped out of law enforcement, and then I even stepped out of my beauty career, Mary Kay, for a while, and then I went back into the law enforcement, arena, went back into the retail experience arena, just trying to get away from a lot of life. I had disappointments. I had, someone that I loved dearly, but out of fear, I couldn't be with him. And then I met someone else, and we were total opposites, and he was even killed. Two different scenarios, but the only two men I ever loved. And so career changes, disappointment, faith, ministry, friendships ended. Friendships you would have never thought. Talk about betrayal. I walked in on one girl who I brought into the business talking about me while she was using my food stamp card. I wasn't selling her anything. I would actually try to help her family out, and I would say, let's split it like sisters would. Walked in on her talking about me like a dog. Talk about bite the hand that feed you. Church disappointment, church hurt, ministry. I left the church, entrepreneurship, just finding out who I was and owning who I was and accepting who I was. And then starting over again by moving up here. It was a lot. Totally different chick from 2009. Totally different chick, but now unapologetic. So the same type of doorway is here where it's like, hey, ding, 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 ding. This season is over. Ding, 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 ding. Need you to make a change. Need you to make a transition. Need you to do this. So the same doorway, familiarity, but I'm a totally different woman walking through it. Maybe life isn't repeating itself sometimes when you have those transitions in life you're seeing something again. Maybe life isn't repeating itself. Maybe you're finally seeing the difference or seeing the lesson from a different level that God wanted you to in the first place. And so, another part, family purpose and priorities. I want, the decision I made this time, I've always said you can't get time back because once time is gone, it's gone, correct? Can't get time back. And the difference in the woman then and now, I don't owe nobody nothing. I don't even owe you an explanation. About 2-3 weeks ago, I caught myself explaining myself at work. And I got home, I over-explained myself to my best friend, I over-explained myself to me, and I over-explained myself to God. And I caught myself, I said, what in the hell is wrong with you? Excuse my expression. You don't owe nobody an explanation for what God told you to do. I was so wrong. And God, I repent for cursing just now, forgive me. But I was like, no, what am I doing? When did you lose you? When are you so afraid of people? You understand what I'm saying? No, whatever decision has to be made, it has to be made for me, by me, because of the good Lord or whatever. And I owe nobody nothing. The girl back then wanted to explain. She wanted everybody comfortable. The girl back then gave 2 weeks. The girl now was like, look, this where we at. This what we need to do. I got to handle this. I got to handle that. Effective immediately. And unapologetic about it. With my kids, look, this, and that. I ain't got time for all that extra. What up? You know what I'm saying? I value work. I value people. I value my identity. I value my values and my character. But there are seasons when the expectations of a position simply cannot align with the responsibilities of your life. In that particular role, I worked overnight. I was away from my children overnight, even though they're adults. Now, they're still my children. I would sleep during the day, couldn't do the things that God was calling me to do in the ministry portion of the day, and I was compromising. If it's causing you to miss out on what you're called to do, you're compromising, and it's not worth it. Family is your first ministry, period, point blank. Period, point blank. Sometimes saying yes to what's most important requires you saying no to something that was once important. God may have allowed this, whatever it is, in a certain season for you, because that's what you needed to say. That was part of his grace. That's what you needed to see, needed to do, part of who you needed to grow from and become from in that season. But once that season is over, it's no longer important. It no longer requires you to be a part of that anymore. So you have to say no. You cannot be everywhere. You cannot be all things to all people. Learn to figure out what's important and what's urgent. There's a difference. You cannot fulfill every role in every season. And I try to teach one of my daughters that. She's an amazing mother. Well, both my daughters are amazing mothers, but the one I'm talking about, she's an amazing mother. And she's trying to, in these 4 years, I was talking to her about, sometimes you have to maneuver your time frame. You might not be able to do quiet time at this time forever because she's growing. I did quiet time at different times as y'all was growing, because once I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then it was 1 school, 2 school, 3 school, 4 school, 5 school, daycare, whatever the case. And you have to be, there was a plaque or in my pastor in Florida's office, and it said, be ye flexible so you don't get bent out of shape, because we have to have enough flexibility to do that. So sometimes saying yes to what's most important, like I said, requires no to something that was once important. You cannot be everywhere. You cannot fulfill every role in every season. It changed. Know your seasons. I'm riding down the street the other day. Leaves are just now starting to turn brown in certain areas because the season is impending upon us. By next month, it'll be totally different. You have to know your season. Sometimes maturity and growing up and bossing up is saying what requires me most right now. Where I'm at right now. What requires me most right now? Sometimes with our children, they may not have required you at one season. They require more of you at another season. And it's not necessarily based on age. And you need to be aware enough to understand that. Let's talk about the part nobody likes to talk about. Now what? And if any of this is resonating with you, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, and share. Also share a comment. Maybe there's some seasons in your life I can learn from you, like I pray that you're learning from me what God has given me. So share with me some nuggets. The part nobody likes, the now what. Okay? This is where I am right now. When you've made this transition, and I just come out of this, and you like, okay, now what? Now I did what you told me to do. Now what? I pulled up here in Georgia at 10 o'clock one morning about 4 years ago, and I'm like, okay, Lord, now what? You know, I'm not here to act like I have every answer. You know, I'm recording this while I'm in transition. Okay? I don't have the testimony wrapped up in a beautiful bow like, all the bows just fell out the sky as soon as I said no. There was some misunderstandings. There was some, what the heck you doing? There was some, okay, God, here we go. You know, walking in that doorway like, for real? You know, there's some uncomfortable space between what was and what will be. It's uncomfortable space. And that's the in between. We love testimonies about how everything worked out. And, you know, Tyler Perry, he's $1 billion man now. I was watching the girl from Spank, Sarah Blake, I think her name is, you know, and she was talking about filling orders in her bathroom, you know, when she first started. You know, we love the stories of where they are now, and they're on the cover of Forbes, but there's an in-between there. You know, and you have to go through something to get to, you have to go through the test to get to the ammonies, you know. But what does faith look like before you know how it's going to look, how it's going to work out? What does faith look like before you know it's going to work out? Before you know how that relationship, I had to end a relationship with that friend. And when they walked in and talked to me, you know, I didn't know what it was going to be like after that. We were so entangled in each other's lives, but I had to sever that cord. I had to cut the head of the snake. And life was more peaceful after that, because you don't need to move forward with baggage. You don't need to move forward with toxicity. It's only going to slow you up. It's only going to blur your vision, literally and professionally, spiritually. What do you do after you pray, make the decision, close the door, and wake up the next morning? When the season is different. I did a video on one of my TikToks or whatever, and I was in the kitchen eating my late night snack at 10 something at night on a Friday. That was really huge because normally I'm at work, suited up in a gun belt, taser, walking around in jail, freezing cold, handling inmates, working with inmates and negative coworkers, some of them, not all. Usually I'm doing that at 11 at night. And instead I was in the kitchen snacking while my boys were arguing about a football game. The greatest joy. The greatest joy. I had missed so many conversations. So what do you do after you pray, make the decision, close the door, and wake up the next morning? You keep moving. You move on the last thing you knew to do. You keep listening. You stay attuned to, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? You keep building. What's my right next step? You keep believing. You didn't bring me this far to lead me. God doesn't bring you this far to bring you this far. That makes no sense. What type of Indian giving God would that be? That's not him. He will not bring you this far to bring you this far. He who is faithful to complete the assignment that he's given you. That's the word, Philippians 2. And in closing, what does hope look like here? Hope doesn't always mean getting back what you lost. Sometimes we have to step away from things, relationships, people, friendships, houses, things, careers. It doesn't mean you're going to get it back. But it means you're okay whether you do or don't. Hope doesn't always mean the door reopens. I may never be able to go back to certain jobs. I may never be able to get certain relationships back. The one true love that I have, everybody have moved on. That's been many, many years, but that door probably will never reopen, but I'm grateful that I had it and it was a lesson learned. Sometimes hope means having courage to walk forward. Hope means trusting God without the entire blueprint. Hope means releasing what's finished. Hope means making room for something new. It's just like capacity. Capacity. Sometimes we want to hold on to everything in this cup and then add more, and there's no room, there's no capacity. Sometimes you have to let clothes go, people go, relationships go, jobs go. You have to, that's just a law. Even if you don't want to believe in the Lord, which my prayer is going to be you do. In life, the whole law of reciprocity, and one of those laws that are out there, it's all about having the ability to receive. You got to have room to receive, to receive. If you don't have room to receive that, you're asking for something, but you don't have the capacity to hold it. So you have to make room for something new. Maybe what you're praying for, and then maybe the reason some of these things are getting cut the way they are is because you've been praying for something. God is ready to deliver it to you, but he had to get you to make room for it. Maybe the closed door isn't punishment. Maybe the closed door isn't punishment. Maybe it's permission. Write that down. Maybe a closed door isn't punishment. Maybe it's permission. Permission to become who you're destined to be. Permission to become. Permission to build what you've been sitting on. You have all these pieces. Maybe it's time to build. Permission to rest. You've been moving and moving and moving. You might get a sleep in every now and then, but you're not resting. Permission to rethink. Think a new thought. Think a new thought. Permission to obey. And think again about what you had going. Permission to obey. Just be obedient. You needed room to obey. Like I said, there were things God was telling me to do, but I would be so sleepy and tired during the day, I couldn't even obey what he told me to do. That's not an excuse. It's just the way it is. Sometimes maybe that closed door I had to walk through was because I needed permission to start doing what he told me to do. He don't take a backseat to nobody. Proverbs 21:30 says, no plan, no insight, no manipulation will thwart the plans of God. So I want to give you a challenge as we close. So if you got a piece of paper, pen, you got your notes, as long as you're not driving, write these down. I want you to do a release list. A release list, right? So one, I want you to grab a notebook and paper, and what has ended that you're still trying to revive? What's one thing, or it could be more than one thing, that has ended that you are trying to revive? It is DOA. It is down there, and you still going at it, trying to revive it. 2, what are you afraid will happen if you release it completely? Why don't you want to let go? What is your fear of what will happen if you release this thing, this person, this situation? What could become possible if you finally make room for what's next? What could become possible? If you make room, that thing you're praying for, if you make room for it, what could be possible? Those are your questions. I'm going to give you a 7-day release challenge, okay? For the next 7 days, I want you to do this. I want you to say, for the next 7 days, I will not chase what God is allowing me to leave. For the next 7 days, I will not chase what God is allowing me to leave. Don't beg. Don't force. Don't manipulate. Don't keep reopening a door just because you're uncomfortable with the hallway. Pray, listen, prepare, build, rest when necessary, and watch what begins making sense. Don't beg, don't force, don't manipulate, don't keep reopening a door just because you're uncomfortable with the hallway. Then pray, listen, prepare, build, rest when necessary, and watch what begins making sense. 17 years ago yesterday, I walked away from one chapter. Earlier this week, I walked away from another. 25 years ago, I walked away from another. Almost 4 years ago, I walked away from another this same month. And maybe this time I'm not supposed to ask, what did I lose? Maybe the question is, what did this ending finally make room for? I want to remind you that you don't have to know the whole plan to take the next step. An ending does not mean your story is over. And there is hope, even in the in-between. So maybe as I'm getting ready to turn 47, I was thinking about what's my theme for this year. Every year I do a theme. So I said maybe 47 isn't about asking me to become somebody new. We always want this transformation. Maybe it's about asking me to finally stop carrying versions of myself whose assignments are over, versions of myself who no longer serve me. There's a freedom in that. There's a freedom in when you're just you and you're unapologetically you and you owe no one nothing. So I'm Tashay, and this is the Hope Collective, where we have hope for every season. I'll see you on the other side of what's next. I wish you the best. Like, subscribe, comment, and share if this has helped you in any way, if you feel it could bless somebody else. I'll see you soon.